Morning. So I was thinking some this morning about Stoicism and the Stoic philosophers, and I'm by no means an expert, but I've been interested in it of late. There's a YouTube channel called Daily Stoic, and if you haven't watched it, it's really worth looking them up. And there's all sorts of materials just about the Stoics and kind of the wisdom passed down through the centuries from these philosophers, and it's interesting stuff. And I think it's really, some of it's just timeless wisdom anyway, but I think a lot of it's very relevant to us today. People like to draw parallels between the U.S. and kind of the late Roman Empire, and just kind of the hedonism and just lack of discipline and general softness of society, and how we're kind of just degenerating into I don't know, lawlessness or some such. But people have this feeling that we're in decline, right? And there's some real parallels between, great empires and kind of where we're headed now. When I was younger, I'd hear this term like Stoicism, and all I really knew was kind of the dictionary definition. You're kind of this, stone-faced, unfeeling, macho kind of thing, right? And I think Stoicism gets unfairly maligned as kind of like this vector for toxic masculinity or something like that, which I think it's not true. And if you look at just kind of the quick bio of like the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who's one of the great Stoic philosophers, and the things that he lived through and led a great nation through, war and famine and plague, especially, as we come through this pandemic, and he had, a bunch of his family die of the plague. And so he often has, death present at mind, right? And we're just this very insulated, coddled society now, right? Where any sort of quote unquote harm is, catastrophized, right? If someone said something mean to me, or I'm in an uncomfortable situation, or, I feel slighted in some way, and I need some great authority figure to come step in and make things right. And I'm not trying to justify, inequities in life, or say that people should not work to make the world better. They should, and I think the Stoics would agree with that. And in fact, the quote that keeps running through my mind recently as I kind of trudge through some, just challenging things at work is, again, Marcus Aurelius saying something that I'll probably misquote it, but, impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It kind of means do the hard thing, right? And it makes me think of the Juggernaut in Marvel universe, right? Like, he's this unstoppable force, and as he builds inertia, crashing through barriers, he becomes unstoppable, right? And that's kind of what makes me think of, right? If you do the hard thing, if you accept the challenge, if you take on the hard work and commit to completion, then you become unstoppable, because you make your weaknesses your strengths, right? And I think we've lost sight of that as a society, right? We eschew hard work and toil and sweat and to an extent suffering, right? And we're, like I said, kind of a hedonistic society. Like, everything is about the pursuit of pleasure and joy and comfort. And no, and maybe I have somewhat of a darker outlook on life because of what I do, but life is pain and toil and strife. It is. It's uncomfortable, and I don't think humans are meant to be happy or be at ease or be comfortable, and we get stagnant and we die when we do. And I'm not saying that there's some sort of like inherent morality or to suffering, right? It's not a virtue per se so much as it's irrelevant, right? And a lot of Stoicism is just focusing on what is under my control, right? So we don't have control of the environment, of the circumstances that present themselves to us, right? And so we accept, to the extent that we don't have influence over the world around us, that this is what is, and worrying about it, fretting about it is not going to change that. And so we can direct our energies into something beneficial, something that we can control, right? So yeah, fretting about, suffering or discomfort or, being, what's the word I'm looking for? Somehow, offended, I guess, fretting about offense. Life is offensive, right? There's going to be awful things that happen to you throughout your life. And I see those awful things happening to good people every day. And it sucks. It's terrible. And, we wish it wouldn't happen. And, we take pains to try and prevent situations from occurring when it's under our control. But, I walked by a whiteboard the other day at work, and somebody had scribbled, ain't nothing to it but to do it. That's kind of the same thing, right? Impediment to action advances action, right? You gotta do it. And then it's kind of like the Shia LaBeouf thing, just do it, right? But it's true, right? I mean, if you get paralyzed by focusing on problems that you can't control, you will never focus on actually finding solutions to your problems. So I think it's really valuable stuff for us to kind of rediscover, and I think that those parallels to declining Roman Empire and us, I mean, there's some valid parallels there, and the people who were striving to right the ship back then were struggling with a lot of the same issues that we struggle with now, and maybe they weren't ultimately successful. No empire lasts, but Rome persisted for centuries, and the U.S. is only a couple hundred years old, and maybe we're on the verge of imploding, or maybe we'll continue to reinvent ourselves and innovate our way out of the problems that we have. If we continue to sabotage free thought and free inquiry under the banner of squashing quote-unquote misinformation, I don't know how well we're going to be able to do that. Galileo was misinformation, right? And the experts in the state, the church, said so and put him under house arrest. And how much did we stymie human flourishing and advancement through the Dark Ages because we had dogmatic outlooks on life, and I mean, now we venerate the science, TM, but we don't really. It's kind of like the what I was talking about recently with the First Amendment. We just pay lip service to it, right? We don't actually practice the scientific method of hypothesis, testing, peer review, and then finally theory, and then again being open to revising theories and subjecting, the current wisdom to, the acid test of reason on an ongoing and unyielding basis until we burn away the dross and distill down whatever we can really just concretely identify as reality, right? Verifiable reality, testable reality. Interesting stuff. So yeah, I hope you check it out. Let's see what else. So there was a proposal at work recently to amend our organizational chart and put community at the top of the organizational chart above our agency executive. An interesting proposal, right? Given the political climate, it makes sense why that would be proposed. And it begs the question: who do the police work for? Who are they beholden to? And what is actually their function, right? And so there was feedback solicited on this proposal. And so my 2 cents was like, we're a government entity, and there's kind of an inherent political aspect to being a functioning part of government, right? That said, law enforcement should endeavor to be apolitical, because application of law should be impartial, right? And you don't want somebody else's concept of morality enforced at the barrel of a gun, any more than somebody else wants your concept of morality enforced at the barrel of a gun, right? We're a pluralistic society, so our enforcement should be as apolitical as possible, right? So that being the case, the oath of office administered to all sworn peace officers in my agency, that the first thing we swear to do is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Oregon, and on down the line. And nowhere in that oath does it say become subservient to the public, right? And we are employed by the public, right? Our funding is provided by the public. And in many ways, yes, the public is our boss, right? But does that put them over us in the overarching hierarchical command structure, right? And I would say no, right? Because the whims of the majority shift, right? And again, if we're governed by the changing whims of a majority, then we're not impartially applying the law. We become, a partisan actor, where we need to be impartial, right? So who is our master if not our boss, right? And if we're swearing an oath to uphold the Constitution of the nation, the state, and the laws of the state, then the Constitution really should be at the top of the org chart, in my opinion, in the organizational chart, in my opinion. And so the Constitution articulates a form of government of, for, and by the people, right? So yes, the people are the Constitution, sort of, right? But the Constitution isn't really the community, right? The Constitution transcends the community, it transcends generations, and it's the common framework, or the common agreed upon principles of liberty and justice that our nation was founded on, right? And so that should really be law enforcement's master, right? That is what we are really responsible to ultimately, and I think should be at the top of the organization, even above our, chief executive, right? Right? The Constitution is there to enshrine and preserve principles of liberty and justice, right? In an, again, impartial application of the law, equality under the law. And I mean, granted, the Constitution is subject to change, But when was the last time we amended the Constitution, right? I mean, you've got to have overwhelming, just massive consensus as a nation to engage in the amendment process, right? So, and that's why the community, quote unquote, shouldn't be at the top of the org chart, right? Because, if you've got this kind of vacillation between, whoever controls 51% of the electorate, you're potentially disenfranchising a very large and perturbed minority in either case, and so it shouldn't shift with shifting popular opinion, but it should shift with overwhelming consensus. You never reach 100% consensus, and the Constitution is there to protect minority rights, and I'm not just talking about ethnic or racial or gender minorities. I'm talking about the ideological minority, right? Whoever does not have power should not therefore be tyrannized, right? And that's what this is all about, is creating a hedge against tyranny. And if we're sworn to uphold the Constitution, the hedge against tyranny, then we should not be placing ourselves as subservient to the tyranny of a simple majority. At least that's my perspective on it. And again, the community, they pay taxes. I am a community member. I pay my taxes, right? They hire us. They fund us, and they, retain our services, but we're retained to perform that function. That's why our oath is sworn to the Constitution, to the nation, to the Constitution of the state, and the laws of the state, right? They don't swear us to fealty to the community or to the capricious majority. And that's what irritated me about seeing officers and especially agency leaders across the country take a knee to the mob, right? And it signals that you are our master, that we will bend to your whims, and we're not. And I won't do it, right? Granted that particular political moment has passed. Nobody's expecting me, for now, to take the knee to the mob, but asked to do it, it's not happening, right? Principles of freedom and justice, those are my master. Those are who I'm beholden to. That's what I'm sworn to uphold. And the minute that expectation changes, I'm done. And have that conversation with recruits all the time. This job could be over for you tomorrow for a variety of reasons, right? You're unable or unwilling to continue to function in this capacity, and you gotta have a plan B. So, and if that changes, I'm not saying if they change the org chart that I'm out, but ultimately, you've got to be guided by your own principles and your own morality, even if the job is supposed to be apolitical. Anyway, let me know what you think. Comments below. Get you on the next one.